Washington, we need to talk. Because while everybody's been arguing about whether Jayden Daniels can repeat his rookie magic, there's a much bigger story quietly unfolding inside Commanders' headquarters, and it might be the single riskiest decision of Dan Quinn's entire coaching career. He didn't just tweak the offense this offseason. He blew it up. He fired the coordinator who took a rookie quarterback to the NFC Championship game, and he handed the keys to a guy who has never called a play in the NFL in his life. If this works, Dan Quinn looks like a genius. If it doesn't, he's cleaning out his office in Ashburn by January. So let's break down exactly what's happening, why it's such a massive risk, and whether this gamble actually has a chance of paying off. Let's rewind to 2024 for a second, because you have to understand what's being thrown away here before you understand what's being risked. Cliff Kingsbury shows up in Washington with a reputation that, frankly, wasn't great. He'd been run out of Arizona. People weren't exactly thrilled about the hire, and then he does something nobody expected. He builds one of the strangest, most unique offenses in the entire NFL. Over 60% of the time, the Commanders were running no-huddle, hurry-up football. Just to put that in perspective, the next closest team in the league wasn't even running it a quarter of the time. Nobody else was doing what Washington was doing. Every single week, opposing defenses had to prepare for something they hadn't seen from anyone else on their schedule. And with a rookie quarterback who'd just come out of a nearly identical system at LSU, it was like handing Jayden Daniels a cheat code. He walks into the league already fluent in the exact style of offense his own team is running. That's not normal for a rookie. That's an enormous head start. And it worked. It worked in a way that turned heads across the entire league. Cliff Kingsbury started getting head coaching interviews. People were calling him the next hot name in offensive coaching. He turned down every single one of those jobs to stay in Washington, and looking at the numbers, you understand exactly why he felt confident doing that. This was a team that on paper did not have a great offensive roster heading into that season. Nobody was picking this group as a top 10 unit. And yet, with a rookie at quarterback, this offense finished as a legitimate top 10 group, arguably a top 5 offense by the end of the year. That's not a fluke. That's a coordinator building a system specifically to hide his roster's weaknesses and maximize his one true superstar. And that superstar wasn't just throwing the ball. Because here's the part people forget. Jayden Daniels was Washington's leading rusher that season. Not just among quarterbacks. He led the entire team in rushing yards, adding almost 900 yards on the ground with his legs alone. That forced defenses into an impossible math problem every single snap. Respect the run and you open up the pass. Respect the pass and Daniels tucks it and takes off. And because defenses had to account for him as a runner, it opened up easier lanes for the actual running backs too. Guys like Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler weren't superstar names, but they didn't need to be, because Daniels' legs were doing half the heavy lifting for them. The whole thing worked because it was custom built around exactly what Jayden Daniels does best. Think about what that actually means for a second. A rookie quarterback dropped into the deep end of the NFL. And instead of drowning, he's operating in a system that feels almost identical to what he ran in college. Most rookies spend their entire first year just trying to speak the language of professional defenses. Jayden Daniels showed up already fluent. That's the kind of advantage that doesn't show up on a highlight reel, but it shows up in the win column. And it shows up in a trip to the NFC Championship game in year one. People forget how rare that actually is. Rookie quarterbacks getting that far is basically unheard of, and a huge chunk of the credit belongs to a scheme that refused to force a square peg into a round hole. So then 2025 happens, and suddenly everybody's calling this offense a disaster. But here's the thing that tabloid headlines conveniently leave out. This wasn't really about scheme. This was about a full-blown medical unit falling apart at the same time. It starts in training camp, actually, before a single snap of the regular season. Terry McLaurin, Washington's #1 receiver, held in during camp while negotiating his contract extension. He eventually gets his deal, sure, but he doesn't return to practice until about a week before the season starts. Instead of a month and a half building chemistry with his quarterback, he gets 7 days. And then the injuries start piling up like dominoes. Jayden Daniels goes down in week 2. But it's not just him missing time. Terry McLaurin misses essentially half the season. Austin Eckler is basically gone for the entire year. Zach Ertz misses the final month. Sam Cosmi is out for half the season. Noah Brown misses a huge chunk of games. Even Luke McCaffrey, someone who was supposed to step up and fill gaps, misses half the year himself. Here's a stat that should honestly stop you in your tracks. Jayden Daniels and Terry McLaurin, the two most important pieces of this entire offense, only started and finished one single game together the entire season. One game. Every other week, one of them was either hurt, out, or not fully healthy. You cannot build a functioning modern NFL offense around two centerpiece players who are never actually on the field together. It's not physically possible, no matter who's calling the plays. And it wasn't only about who was missing, it was about how Jayden Daniels' body changed after that week 2 injury. Once a rushing quarterback takes a real lower body hit, that explosiveness doesn't just snap back overnight. And remember, this whole offensive philosophy was built on Daniels providing that extra element with his legs. After the injury, he simply couldn't provide that at the same level. You can actually see it in the numbers. His success rate as a rusher dropped from being the 6th most effective rusher in the entire NFL, not just among quarterbacks. Among every single player at every position, all the way down into the low 50s percentage-wise the following year. That's an enormous drop-off, and it changed everything about how defenses could play this offense. Suddenly, the run game became far more predictable, because the threat of Daniels breaking off a scramble wasn't hanging over every play anymore. It even got to the point where, statistically, backup quarterback Marcus Mariota actually outperformed Daniels in several efficiency categories last season, largely because Mariota was healthier and could still threaten defenses with his legs. That tells you everything about how much this whole system depends on quarterback mobility and how much a single injury can unravel it. Then pile on the receiver situation. With McLaurin banged up for half the season, the offense leaned on Deebo Samuel as a lead receiver, and Deebo has simply never been that kind of downfield weapon. He's a yards-after-catch guy, not a #1 target who stretches a defense vertically. Guys like Jalen Lane, Chris Moore, and Trayvon Burks were given chances to step up, and nobody really seized the moment. Zach Ertz was arguably the 2nd most effective piece of this passing attack, and then he got hurt too. So when you stack all of that together, the holdout, the injuries to the two most important players, the mobility loss, the lack of a supporting cast, you start to realize that blaming Cliff Kingsbury for this offense's decline last year is honestly a pretty lazy conclusion. Given everything working against this team, the fact that they still finished top 10 in success rate and top 5 in red zone efficiency is arguably a credit to the coaching staff, not an indictment of it. And let's be fair here, none of this is meant to say Cliff Kingsbury was flawless or that there was zero room for growth in this offense. Every coordinator has things to clean up year over year. But there's a big difference between a system that needs refinement and a system that needs to be torn down and rebuilt from scratch. The evidence really points toward the former, not the latter. This wasn't a scheme that got figured out by opposing defensive coordinators. It wasn't a system that stopped producing when healthy players were on the field. It was a good offense that got hit by an almost unbelievable run of bad injury luck at exactly the two most important positions on the roster. And yet, Washington fired him anyway. And you know who wasn't happy about that decision? The quarterback himself. Jayden Daniels reportedly disagreed with moving on from Kingsbury, and it's not hard to understand why. This was the system that made him a Heisman winner in college, the system he transitioned into seamlessly as a rookie, the system that maximized every single tool in his arsenal. But Dan Quinn has a different vision now. He wants something closer to what you see from Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, or Ben Johnson, a true traditional under-center pro-style offense. And to build that vision, he didn't bring in some big splashy hire with a decade of coordinator experience. He promoted David Blough, a former backup quarterback who is close with Jayden Daniels personally, and who has never called a single offensive play as a coordinator at the NFL level in his life. This is Blough's first season with full control of an entire offense, and Dan Quinn is trusting him with the future of the franchise quarterback and, quite possibly, his own job security. And it's worth pausing on David Blough himself for a second, because this hire is a fascinating gamble all on its own. Blough spent years bouncing around the league as a journeyman backup quarterback before transitioning into coaching, and he spent recent seasons on Washington's staff working closely alongside Kingsbury. That means he has a front-row seat to exactly what worked and exactly what didn't in this offense over the past 2 years. He also has an existing personal relationship with Jayden Daniels, which theoretically could help that quarterback coordinator trust develop faster than it would with an outside hire who has to build that rapport from scratch. But there's no getting around the fact that he's never called plays at this level before. Not for one single regular season game. Every single other coordinator hire around the league this offseason came with some kind of track record, some kind of tape you could point to and say, here's proof this person can do this job under pressure. With Blough, there simply isn't a body of work like that yet. Washington is betting entirely on projection and trust, not on precedent. So what actually changes on the field? A handful of pretty significant things. First, you're going to see dramatically less no-huddle and hurry-up football. It might not disappear completely since Blough cut his teeth learning under Kingsbury, but that 60% number is almost certainly going away. Second, you're going to see this team operate from under center far more often, which naturally brings more pre-snap motion into the mix. Third, expect a much more diverse playbook on both sides of the ball, more run concepts, more passing concepts, more variety overall. And fourth, and maybe most significantly for Jayden Daniels specifically, expect a lot less of the quarterback run game that made him so dangerous as a rookie. It's also worth remembering what this means for the rest of the roster, not just Jayden Daniels. Terry McLaurin, assuming he stays healthy, could actually benefit from a more traditional passing structure built around route concepts designed to isolate a true number one receiver rather than leaning so heavily on quick game and screens the way the old system often did. A more balanced run game could take pressure off a receiver room that, outside of McLaurin, still doesn't have a proven second or third option. And along the offensive line, moving away from a shotgun-exclusive system could actually simplify some of the protection schemes, since under-center run action and play action naturally slow down pass rushers in ways a purely spread shotgun attack sometimes can't. So even beyond the quarterback conversation, there are ripple effects across this entire offensive unit that could break either way, depending on how well Blough installs this new system. Now, there are real, legitimate upsides to this shift. A pro-style offense is inherently less predictable. Defenses can't just tee off knowing hurry up is coming on 60% of snaps. Being under center opens up genuine play-action opportunities and run blocking angles that simply aren't available out of a shotgun-heavy scheme. You can run outside zone. You can disguise blocking schemes in ways that just weren't possible before. And theoretically, less quarterback rushing means fewer hits absorbed by Jayden Daniels, which could mean better health and more availability over a full season. There's a reason nearly every team in the NFL runs some version of a pro-style system and treats no huddle as mostly a 2-minute drill tool. It genuinely does open up more schematic creativity when it's executed well. But here's where the gamble part really comes into focus, because the risks are just as real as the potential rewards. Risk number one. This new system is dramatically more dependent on the offensive coordinator than the old one ever was. Kingsbury's system essentially simplified things down to a handful of code words at the line of scrimmage and then let Jayden Daniels' talent do the rest. This new system puts far more of the burden on David Blough's play-calling mind. If Blough turns out to be the next great offensive innovator, fantastic. This offense could take off. But if he's not ready for that responsibility in year one, there's no built-in safety net the way there was before. Risk number 2. You're intentionally reducing the impact of the exact trait that makes Jayden Daniels one of the most uniquely dangerous quarterbacks in football. His legs are a weapon. Defenses have to account for him as a runner on every single snap, and that fear alone opens up easier throws. Dial that back, and you're voluntarily giving up one of your biggest schematic advantages. Risk number 3. This is going to be significantly harder mentally for Jayden Daniels. In the no-huddle system, defenses were forced to show their coverage before the snap because they simply didn't have time to disguise anything. Now, with a full huddle and a longer play clock, defenses get all sorts of opportunities to shift, rotate, and disguise coverages both before and after the snap. Daniels is going to have to process all of that at a level we simply haven't seen from him yet in his young career. And risk number 4. This requires Jayden Daniels to learn essentially a brand new skill set almost overnight. He has never operated from under center at any level of football. Not high school, not college, not the pros. Every single offense he's ever played in has been shotgun heavy, ARPO heavy, no huddle heavy. Turning your back to the defense on play action from under center is a completely different skill, and for a lot of quarterbacks, it takes years to truly master. Just look at Caleb Williams last season in Chicago. It took him the better part of a season to get comfortable operating under center. And his efficiency numbers took a real hit during that adjustment period. There's a real chance Jayden Daniels experiences some of those same growing pains this year while he adapts to an entirely new style of quarterbacking. So where does that leave the Commanders heading into 2026? Honestly, it leaves them at a genuine crossroads. If Jayden Daniels can make this transition smoothly, there's a real long-term benefit here. His athleticism and rushing ability aren't going to last forever. Realistically, he's got maybe until around 30 years old before that explosiveness starts to fade. If he wants a career that stretches into his late 30s or beyond, becoming a legitimate pro-style pocket passer now is exactly the kind of investment that pays off over a decade-plus career. But if this transition doesn't go smoothly, if Daniels struggles operating under center, if the play-action game doesn't click, if David Blough isn't ready for the pressure of calling plays at this level, this Washington roster is still very much built around what Jayden Daniels provides, and if he's not playing at his ceiling, this team could easily slide back into the 5, 6, 7 win range. For an ownership group like Josh Harris's that just watched this team reach a conference championship 2 years ago, back-to-back disappointing seasons is exactly the kind of pattern that ends coaching careers. And there's a broader pattern worth mentioning here too. This league has seen this exact movie before. A team with a dynamic, dual-threat rookie quarterback decides that the long-term answer is to reshape him into a traditional pocket passer, sometimes sooner than fans would like. Sometimes it works out beautifully, and a quarterback adds a genuinely dangerous new dimension to his game while keeping his athleticism as a bonus weapon rather than a primary tool. Other times, teams strip away exactly what made a young quarterback special before he's ready to survive without it, and the results are a lot messier. The margin between those two outcomes usually comes down to 2 things: how good the play caller actually is, and how quickly the quarterback can absorb an entirely new mental framework for the position. Both of those variables are complete question marks in Washington right now, and that's exactly why this decision carries so much risk. So make no mistake, this genuinely is a massive bet from Dan Quinn. He's betting that a first-time play caller with zero coordinator experience can successfully rebuild Jayden Daniels' game from the ground up in a single offseason, while simultaneously keeping this team competitive enough to avoid regression. If it works, Dan Quinn looks like a coach who correctly identified the long-term ceiling of his quarterback and had the guts to make the harder, smarter call. If it doesn't, this might be remembered as the offseason decision that cost him his job in Washington. What do you think? Does David Blough have what it takes to pull this off? Or is Dan Quinn making the biggest mistake of his coaching career? Drop your confidence level in the comments 1 through 10 and let us know exactly why. And if you want to stay locked in on everything happening with this team all season long, every training camp update, every preseason snap, every twist in this quarterback transformation story, make sure you hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a single update. We're just getting started on this one, and it's going to be a story worth watching all year long.
Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.